This Week in Radio Tech, episode 192, is brought to you by the Telos Zephyr Extreme ISDN codec. After 20 years, Zephyr is still the household name in high-quality audio transport in real time. On the web at telos-systems.com.
And now, our feature presentation.
Twert.
From closets to the backseat of cars to superb and expensive recording studios, George Whittam serves up great advice for the rest of us engineers.
All right, calm down. He says that to everyone.
This calls for immediate discussion.
What's up, Doc?
All your days are belong to us.
From his palatial office of important business,
or in a choice hotel in a distant land.
This is Kirk Harnack.
Chris Tobin joins me discussing voice-over studio engineering with George Whittam, VO engineer to the stars.
You're dialed in to This Week in Radio Tech.
Hey, welcome in. It's This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host. Just delighted to be here. We're doing the show, if you're watching live, we're doing the show at a special time. Normally, we do This Week in Radio Tech about 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 Central. And this week, we're moving the time. We're doing it up in the middle of the day. So that's right. I'm taking an hour off from regular work. Chris Tobin is too. And guess what? We caught a guy that we've had on before, a very interesting engineer named George Whittam. He's our guest on the show today. So welcome into George Whittam. We'll bring him in just a minute. Our show is brought to you by Telos, happens to be my employer, makers of the Telos Extreme ISDN codec. This is the device that followed after the Zephyr, the world-famous Zephyr. Tens of thousands of Zephyrs and Extremes all over the world. We'll talk about those later. On this show, we're going to be talking about home studios, home studio technology. And when I say home studio, I ain't talking no amateur stuff. We're talking about real professional voiceover studios, usually, not always, but usually done from home. And George is going to give us some updates on that. For next, I want to bring in, though, the best-dressed engineer in radio. Let's see if he lives up to it today. From Manhattan, New York, it's Chris Tobin. Hey, Chris, welcome in.
Well, thank you, Kirk. Well, today it's a pullover hoodie, I guess it would be, promoting Sag Harbor, New York, on the east end of Long Island. It's a nice, balmy 50 degrees here, so I have to warm up a bit. No jacket and tie today. All
right. And Chris, you are a consultant to the industry, having served at some big radio stations and with an important company or two along the way. How would you describe what you're doing nowadays, so just so folks can have some context? Sure.
Well, nowadays I'm still working as a independent, I guess I'll call it independent contractor with the folks at CCS Musicam with my own company called Creative Content Solutions. And what we do is help people make connections and do stuff with producing content. So if you're a radio station looking to do outside broadcasts and need codecs and understanding how to do it, I help you with that. If you want to learn how to use microphones with those codecs, I do that too. If you want to know the technology behind all that stuff, I can help you with that. And back before then, I was working with CBS Radio. And I work with ABC and CBS Television as well. So I've got the background to help you out with getting things done. If you want to know about the technologies themselves, I leave that to the white papers. You don't need me to tell you about that.
Okay. And our guest today, we're going to bring in, last minute, I'm so glad he was available, George Whittam. GeorgeWhittam.com is his website, and George is a consultant, a voiceover consultant engineer to the stars. George, welcome in. Glad you're here.
Thanks, Kirk. It always makes me laugh when I hear that said, but I have been lucky to work with some pretty top voice actors out there in the business. I work with a couple different companies. That's why I just put GeorgeWhittam.com on the lower third. Well, I'm with VO Studio Tech. That's the company I started a few years ago. And I've now merging that company with another great business based out of Manhattan called Edge Studio, edgestudio.com. And they're all about the voiceover business. They do production, they do coaching. And now, because of me, they do studio tech and design as well. So that's my world, voiceover. I'm completely 100% eat, sleep, breathe this stuff.
George, I got to ask you, do you do any voiceover work yourself, or are you strictly behind on the other side of the microphone?
I'm strictly behind the scenes. I've been asked that question one of the biggest entrees into the industry for any voice actor is, you have a great voice. Did you ever consider voice acting? And so I hear that all the time. And someday, maybe, in my golden years. But anyway, I don't do voice acting.
I'm the kind of guy, I pay attention to voices, typically in animated shows, and I notice who's saying what, and sometimes I'm right about it. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a hanger-on or exactly an aficionado, but I do notice voices. And George, I've always noticed that your voice is very comfortable, always very positive sounding. It kind of an everyman with a positive lift to it. So I think you do great doing that. He's got to be some character that you'd be just awesome portraying.
I might need to lift that off if I ever want to look for an agent. That's that's what they're looking for. They're looking for voices that are everyman. They don't. The big thing now is the non-announcer read. They put it right on the scripts. Don't sound like an announcer. And now if there is a commercial with an actual announcer, it's sort of like a caricature of an announcer. It's almost even more exaggerated.
That's true.
Have you seen that
friend of mine
commercial?
Is what do you call it? Voice acting person. He was telling me the same thing.
Which commercial, George?
Have you seen that Sprint commercial with James Earl Jones? Where they're supposed to be reading tweets.
Yes.
And it's almost, and then the guy that does the voiceover on that is a client of mine, Bill Ratner. He's the actual announcer on the commercial, and he hams it up even further, but that's not, but in general, if you want to be cool, slick, all that stuff, it's like the down read. It's just understated and you throw it away. You're just a guy. That's the way things have gone.
Our VO, we'll get to some technical talk here too, but this is just a fascinating thing because this is This Week in Radio Tech, and as engineers, we deal with talent all the time, and we deal with people, some of whom are famous, and others are just a guy at a radio station in a medium or small market, or maybe even a big market. So it's interesting to find out about the talent that is behind the microphone, and in certain, especially the guys that do it in the big time. Have you found, George, that announcers by and large are flexible enough to accommodate this current style of non-announcing announcing?
Well, it's a good question. I have clients who were really, really big time. I mean, some of the biggest in the industry 5-10 years ago, and they're on sort of a downswing. It's a little bit of an adapt or die kind of thing. I mean, you have to learn. You have to be an old dog that'll learn new tricks. And there's voice coaches out there who specialize in training voice actors that have been doing this for 20, 30 years to expand their skill set and become more flexible. The guys that are the most successful in the business these days are really flexible. You can hear them in 3 different spots and think they were 3 different actors. And it's not like they're doing these, they're not doing cartoon voices. I mean, they have styles that they can, like this one guy, Scott Rummel, man, he's unbelievable. You can hear him on a spot for a food store, and then one of the top blockbuster movies, like an action film, and then a kid's movie and a TV promo. You'd never know it's the same guy. I mean, flexibility is super key.
Okay, I just noticed something. I see 2 microphones in your shot right now.
I was wondering if you were going to notice
the little Countryman, and then there's the one in front of you. Sounds like you're using the one in front of you, but what's going on?
Yeah, I am using this oldie but goodie MXL mic that has been just bashed around in my road case of SM58s and stuff, and this thing just keeps on working. I keep playing around. Mics don't stay around here for very long because they end up in somebody's studio eventually. But I've been playing around with the headset mic idea. This is the cheapest headset mic you can actually buy. That has an XLR connector, or can be plugged in with XLR. This is made by Pile. This is literally a $15 microphone, and it sounds like it. So here's this is this mic here. It's not awful, it's serviceable, but the noise floor goes up. It's more hiss. And there's certainly no match for a studio condenser mic like this one over here. So I've been using this one for most of critical stuff, and I use this one for just Skyping and consulting with clients, so I can kind of do this and relax.
Sure. Well, is it taped to your headphones, or is it?
Yeah, it's this is that putty that you use to put posters and stuff up on the wall.
Oh yeah.
So I puttied the thing onto the side of my headset.
Wow. Well, when you switch to it, actually, now I realize I'm listening, over 2 Skype connections and just over a little earbud here, which is not a bad earbud. But Chris Tobin, what did you think when he switched to that headset mic?
That was good. Yeah, you could hear a slight change, but not enough to to offer any nastiness. But I think he's right. On Skype, you probably wouldn't notice it, or any limited bandwidth audio channel. Because I've been playing with a couple of tram lavalier microphones, doing the same thing with a piece of metal and making a headset mic out of it for just guest positions. And it works really well, but it's interesting. There is, wow, what a difference between just a regular microphone and a lav that's not using a chest as a resonator.
Yeah, it's true. You're using one right now, right? Is that a tram on your lapel there?
Actually, this one is a tram. It's made by a company. It's the guys. It's called Sonotrim. Hang on, let me get the little. Yeah, it's the Sonotrim. It's based on the tram microphone. It's one of the ones I've been selling for years and recommending to people over the years for audio stuff. I've used it on many broadcasts, and it works out really nice. Cool. It's actually one of the few lavs I've found that doesn't seem to have. Doesn't get impacted by the environment that it's in or on. It's nice. It's flat. It's just right. I've used it everywhere. Matter of fact, I used it once for one of our twerk broadcasts when I was in Times Square, sitting doing a live Skype from a laptop at a
That's right.
park bench, and everyone's looking at me like I'm talking to myself. And it actually worked really well. It's got nice rejection and everything else. So I was happy.
Cool. I love that kind of stuff. I love mics that are really versatile and work well in a lot of different people, because people are always asking me, what mic should I buy? And boy, that would be, I mean, that's literally almost a book, right? But I'm like, I always tell people, your first mic should just be a mic that works. It's low noise and it's easy to use and it's affordable, because once you figure out the limitation of that mic, then you can start upgrading and upgrading your chain. But just start with a mic that just is easy to use, has overall just a really pleasant sound quality to it, has no bizarre curve or any emphasis or anything to it, and just learn how to use that mic.
Hey,
I agree.
George,
That's definitely true.
question comes to mind here. Notwithstanding the mic selection, because as you said, that could be a whole book, if not at least a 3-hour podcast. Sure. Describe for me the simplest and most elegant home voiceover setup after the microphone. What's a preamp that works? How do you get that into a computer? So is it a preamp that has a USB out? Do you need an audio console? Can you just do this on a laptop? So what's a simple yet elegant way to do this at low cost?
Well, I mean, I get referred clients from voice coaches who just finished their training series and they just cut their first commercial demo and they're all ready to start making money, printing money. So they want their first Mr. Microphone, and there really is. It used to be, I mean, it would be embarrassing to even admit that you were using a USB mic 5 years or more ago. And some people now still believe that USB mics are not up to snuff, but I have found that there are a couple, and one in particular that I'm really just consistently impressed with. Its sound quality, and because it's a USB mic, its simplicity. And the Shure PG42 USB, which is the PG42 is sort of like their affordable line, which is derived from the capsule that's probably in a much more expensive mic. And, it's plug and play on Mac and Windows. I think it's pretty much plug and play. And it has its own gain control. It's got a headphone volume. It's got a headphone jack for zero latency monitoring so you can hear yourself. It's got a monitor blend. So if you're doing Skype and you're being directed or something, you can turn them down a little bit. Just turn a little dial. And it's got a high pass filter, which I pretty much always use. If the mic has one, I almost always put it on if it's not at a weird frequency, if it's like 80 hertz or something. And it's got a pad. So I find that a voice actor that knows what they're doing can use that mic to incredibly good effect. And you really don't need much else in regards to equipment that way. It goes right into the computer. The signal to noise ratio is very respectable. The sound quality of the mic is totally pro. I mean, if you did an A/B between that mic and another studio mic going through a Scarlett 2i2 Focusrite USB interface, which is one of my favorite affordable interfaces, you'd be very hard pressed to tell. I think it'd be impossible to tell the difference. So USB mics are starting to become more realistic for that home studio or for just a travel setup where you have to be able to make a job happen when you're on the road.
That I'm looking at the PG-42. It's the dash USB model. There's also one that doesn't have USB, right?
Yeah, I recommend the non-USB ones when you have to run a long distance. The USB is not happy over more than, say, 15, 20 feet of cable, I find. They get really flaky. So if your studio is in one space and your equipment's in another, I usually say go with the Pro XLR Studio kind and then get an external converter. That tends to work better.
So what's your favorite mic to USB converter? You mentioned a Focusrite a moment ago. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 has become one of our favorites. It's just we try all these different things, and it's not that it's always the best tool for the job, but eventually you land on something that just seems to be consistently pleasing among as many different people as possible. And I consult so many people, probably 10 to 15 different people a week. And when you're trying to support people on Windows XP and Windows 7 and Vista and 8 and Mac going back to, Tiger or Snow, a Lion or something, you want something that you can pretty well universally recommend and almost guarantee it's going to work. And that is one of those pieces of equipment. It just works well on a lot of different computers at different eras, different OSs, and its sound quality is very respectable. The functions that it has are really great, and I think the first guy that turned me onto it was Bo Weaver, who was an awesome guy who was really a radio guy going way back and is now a really successful promo guy.
I've talked to Bo Weaver. I've talked to Bo Weaver about ISDN and IP codecs. He called me up
one day. Wax geeky about this stuff like the best of us. He is amazing. Yeah, he's a voiceover geek, man. He really is.
Do you have any clients who use those like half drum things behind the microphone if they're if they can't help but be in a noisy house?
Yeah,
is something like that the least bit effective? Does it work?
Yeah, they were first designed by, I think, SE Electronics, and it was called the Reflexion filter. And so now, they invented it, and of course, everybody's knocked them off. What those things are really good for is if you have a studio environment already, it's already pretty quiet. You've already got, some acoustical treatment, and now you just want to deaden it down and control it a little bit more for a little bit more of a dry sound. That's what those things are good for. For almost any other use, I think they're just mostly useless because they don't keep a lot of background noise out at all. Very, very little, if at all. Okay. And they are, what's unique about voiceover as opposed to, say, radio or singing is you're always reading a script. And so where do you put the script when you have this freaking thing in front of your face? So I like having the mic to the side like I have it now. Maybe hanging down is more common. And then having the script underneath it or just to the side of it. Because, you can move these mics around a lot and still get a very much on microphone sound. I mean, if I do it right, you can barely tell I'm moving the mic, right? Because there's a pretty big sweet spot. And once you get it right, you can have the script right in front of you and have a very clear view of the script and not have the mic obstruct you. So I think that's one of the most important things to getting a home studio right. So those backdrop Reflexion things are kind of the antithesis of being able to do that.
Interesting. All right. On one of our This Week in Radio Tech shows a few weeks ago, we had some interesting stories from Tom Ray and from Chris Tobin particularly about doing work in people's homes. Bill O'Reilly, for example, was one of the people that Chris Tobin ended up doing some work with, and Tom Ray equally worked with a number of people. So and in fact, Chris Tobin told us about his run-in with Dan Rather's handler. That was interesting.
We know it is the nicer the actor, the meaner the handler.
Oh my gosh, true. That seems to be true.
That's so true.
Or the celebrity. I met David Bowie, super sweet guy. And the handler was like, let's go, move. It's like, that's how it is.
I wonder if you might be able to, either with or without naming names, regale us with some interesting story about working with a voiceover actor or actress. I know, of course, we've heard the Don LaFontaine stories on a previous episode. But if there's anything you'd like to repeat or tell us about it, and really, I'm looking, what's a good teachable moment out of working with some of these high-paid celebrities.
Well, yeah, I rarely at this stage have worked with a lot of like household name celebrities. I've worked with a handful of guys that are definitely working actors, where you'd see them on camera, you'd see them and go, oh, I know that guy. I'm about to work with Patrick Warburton, who's been on many shows and stuff. And the thing about most of my clients that are really the workaday voice actors who don't do much screen work is they are just super easy to work with, people with egos mostly very much in check. And because they work behind the camera or behind the scenes, they are not under the pressure of the exposure of a screen actor or celebrity. And a lot of them that do this will tell you every time that it's the best kept secret in acting, because they just don't have to deal with that. And still, you can make a very healthy living doing this kind of work. But let's say it's one thing that's bizarre about this industry is because of the technology, now these actors have to be available on really short notice, almost comically so. I mean, I'll bring up Bo Weaver again. He for the longest time had a place here in LA, and then he has a place out in Ojai. And they're about an hour and 40 minutes drive. I mean, and literally he'll have to pull off the side of the road because he's between the two studios, maybe a half hour from one or the other. That ain't enough time. They need it like now. And these guys get in the back seat of the car. They pull off to a quiet area if they can find one in LA, in the valley or something, and find somewhere quiet. They pull off the side of the road, get in the back seat, because that's where the most dampening is around, and they pull out their shotgun mic. 416 is really, really common. Plug it into their MicPort Pro, into their MacBook Air or whatever, and in some cases they're logging in with Source Connect. They're getting out their LTE modem, and they're doing ISDN sessions through an ISDN bridge from the back seat of their cars.
Oh my God!
I mean, yeah, Joe Cipriano is another guy, also from a radio background, that is famous for doing this. He's like, listen to the spot, George, I did, and the tags were all recorded in the back of my car, and the rest was recorded at home. It's nuts, but that's the kind of pressure the voice actors are under, and those that are doing promo and topical and what do you call it when you're doing I guess affiliate work, that kind of thing. The pressure is intense. I
guess I always heard that it's called TV announce booth, but there's probably that was when the guy was there at the station.
Yeah, these guys are doing the announce booth stuff that normally would have been done with a voice actor in house, and now they're doing it from their own house, and so they need that same kind of "we need you right now" kind of thing, even though they're in another city or whatever. And so it's very intense. And if their equipment fails, that can be the loss of a client that's paying them $20, $30, $50, $80, $1,000 a year. So the pressure is really on. And, because I'm kind of like the on-call technician for a lot of these guys, the pressure's on me to make sure the equipment stays up and running. So I'm really, really big about simplicity and equipment that is reliable and having backups on hand. It's really crucial.
Speaking of reliable and simplicity, for a couple of decades now, we've had ISDN lines, and they've been reliable. Once you get them working, typically they can be very reliable, especially in the sense that the phone company was legally required to make sure they work at your demarcation point, at the entrance to your building or your house or wherever. It had to work there. And they were as reliable as the rest of the public switch telephone network. In many places, of course, you can still get ISDN lines, but in many places now you can't, or you can't get new installations. Or
I have an email sitting here right now from a client who's in Venice.
Yeah,
I mean, she's right down the road from me in Venice, California, in the city, and they're telling her she can't get ISDN. Yeah, it's crazy.
So, how's that? I know there are solutions. I'm sorry. What was the name of the one that you just mentioned with Joe Cipriano?
Oh, Source Connect is one of them.
Source Connect. Yes. So Source Connect is a way for an artist to connect to a central point where it's then translated to an ISDN call, because that's probably what the studio has that he's talking to, right? ISDN.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally Source Connect is obviously designed to work with other Source Connect users.
Yeah.
But there's so many studios in Hollywood who are really slow to adapt to new technology. They just don't want to do new stuff, and they've already got ISDN and it works. So if you're stuck on Source Connect or any other IP thing, you then have to hire out a bridge, which is connecting the IP world to the ISDN world. And we're literally talking about a computer here and a codec here, a couple of patch cables. You know, I mean, it's real basic, but they rely on those things to make that connection. So eventually there'll be open standards, and we'll all be talking the same IP audio languages, but we're a ways away from that, so there's a lot of competing technology.
So thinking about the IP technology, there are plenty of software solutions and there's hardware solutions. Certainly, Telos makes some hardware solutions, Musicam makes hardware solutions, and Comrex and other people do too. And then there's a number of software solutions, and these are solutions that I'm not very familiar with. So you mentioned Source Connect. What else is out there for something that you run on a Mac or PC that gives you IP almost real time, back and forth with another studio?
Well, I start with Source Connect because it's been at it maybe not the longest, but they've worked the hardest at getting the voiceover people on board, getting the productions on board and studios on board. So they're probably the leader right now, I would say, in that regard. And it runs on Mac or Windows, and it will work as a plugin in Pro Tools or another DAW, or it runs as a standalone application, and it's very flexible that way. And there's latency. The latency is not as low as ISDN. There's a little more delay. So when you're trying to have conversation over a Source Connect, it can be a little challenging. You step on each other from time to time. Yeah. But the sound quality is up to like 128 kilobit per second AAC mono or something, which is really high fidelity. So there's that. Then there's all these other companies that are out there that are percolating and coming out of the woodwork and trying to, get their shot at it. There's Connection Open is one of them, and I haven't got a real world demo of that yet, but it looks like it could be pretty promising. Audio TX Communicator. It's been around probably even longer than Source Connect, but it's Windows only. So he kind of built in a little obsolescence there, because so much of the pro audio industry is Mac. I know, I could talk Mac, Windows all day long, but the radio world is definitely Windows, and the music and production world is Mac for the most part. So he's kind of alienated a huge amount of the base. Then there's another one that's really intriguing that I'm starting to do tests with, called Lucy, or Lucy Live, LUCI.EU. And what makes it really, interesting is that it's the first one I've seen come out that will run on Mac, Windows, and also Android, iOS, and a BlackBerry even.
What?
And
they have a BlackBerry version?
They have a BlackBerry
got BlackBerry
version,
and Linux too. You can do Linux.
And Linux, I mean, talk about,
and I know that Chris Tobin's familiar with this too. Here you go. To take that shot, Andrew. There's Lucy.
What it looks like.
Running on an Android, and then I've got it on a tablet too. And in fact, some broadcast hardware codec manufacturers are making sure that their codecs, work with Lucy.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very promising because of its cross-platform capability and universal. The fact that it works on mobile devices. The dream for voice actors and broadcasters alike, and the broadcasters are a little bit, ahead of us, when it comes to being mobile in the field. But, to plug a quality mic directly into your phone, and that is your broadcast, that's your rig, and all you got to do is find somewhere quiet with no echo and shove your head in a coat closet or throw a towel over your head and get something close to broadcast or, professional studio quality, is the dream for the voice actor for sure.
And I guess most VO are most VO sessions relatively short in duration? 5 minutes to an hour?
It absolutely depends. I mean, they can be as short as 5 minutes. I've even seen some be as short as 1 minute. Let's just pick up that one line. Okay, they dial up on the Zephyr and they read all right, we got it, thanks. Like, wow, that's a way to make a living.
That's true.
And some of them can be an hour or more, and it depends on the type of the script, the size of the budget, who's directing it, the length of the script, so many factors. And now with the audiobook industry, of course, getting bigger and bigger all the time. Talk about long form. I mean, these folks are reading on average 4 to 6 hours a day. Wow. So they are just in constant state of recording, and they have to have really consistent acoustics and really low noise floor. And what's the craziest thing of all is that's probably the lowest paying voiceover work per hour that there is, but yet it's one of the more difficult ones to record because it's an exposed voice, totally solo and dry with no bed or music or anything. You can't tolerate a helicopter or a passing vehicle or anything. It's difficult to do it well. And a lot of them are in closets, in a house with no ventilation. And they're using acoustical foam or something on the wall, and which sometimes sounds pretty hollow. And, so I found myself doing a lot of acoustical treatment for people in closets and trying to find products that work really well for that. Like there's one that my buddy Dan makes called VO Studio Suit. And it's it's his repurposed product that he got at a warehouse that was used for insulating Quonset huts. It's military surplus. But he repackages it. He cuts it down to sizes that are manageable. And he sells these, and you can just hang them up in a closet, and it tones down and reduces the low and mid-range reflection and makes the room usable, where normally, it'd be difficult to make a small closet sound good. So, I mean, long form is really hard. And I have a lot of clients that fortunately have a good business doing short form work that hopefully, they're like, I hope I never have to do, a long form job. If I have to ever do this for more than an hour at a time, I think I'd go crazy.
I'm sorry, a silly question just popped in my head. I think I know the answer, but hey, George, my shower sounds great. I mean, when I sing in the shower, it just sounds fantastic. Why can't I record my next audiobook in the shower?
Right. It's like when you're listening to an audio, anything that's just dry, just a solo voice, unless it's a radio play or something where you're trying to add, create an illusion of being in a certain space. You generally don't want to have anything that would distract the listener from your direct voice, your dry voice, with nothing else coloring the sound. And that's why that dry, dead sound is so desirable. Now, for a voice actor's standpoint, it's all about, neutral, dry sound that let the producer handle the rest. So if they want to lay something on there, some effect or whatever, go for it. But that's definitely not desirable. Think of listening to an audiobook. It's at night. Maybe you're laying in bed listening on your earbuds, and you just want it to be, just you and that voice. Imagine if there was a bathroom echo around that voice the whole time. I mean, you'd be so distracted, so you can't have that echo.
Yeah. Good point. I wasn't serious. I that, but
I know, but it's, some people, singing, you can get away with a lot for recording a singing voice. You can really get away with a lot more liveness, echo, and depending on the needs, noise floor can be higher because usually there's music going, you can't get away with that with voiceover. It's a whole different studio design. And I get clients that say, I'm being told I need a combination of diffusion and reflection, and I don't want it to be too dead, or it's just not going to sound very good. And I'm like, well, you know what? In most cases, in a really small home studio or a booth or a closet, there's no amount of reflection that's in any way useful, because all it's going to do is color the sound of your voice, create these comb filter standing waves, where the sound bounces and creates this phasing sound, and it's never a good thing.
Your voice is sounding very good. Are you not getting any reflections off your desk? I can't see your desk in the shot. Is it just a flat, hard desk?
I'll show you my desk a little bit more.
Oh, well, there's some a lot of rough surfaces there. Yeah.
Well, the mic is probably at least 6 inches away from the desk. It's overhanging my desk.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So if you look there, I mean, it's pretty far from the desk.
Okay,
You know,
so it's not getting a reflection. So it's not nothing really audible from the desk.
No. And then I've got it's a weird room. I got really lucky with this house. It's got a vaulted ceiling.
Oh yeah.
It's got bookshelves all around, right? So it has, that all acts as natural diffusion. So that breaks up reverberation. And then I've got this nifty folding vocal booth. I think it's called the Voice Cabinet, made by ATS Acoustics. And it's a pretty nifty product. It can be hung on the wall and it can be folded shut and opened up. It looks like one of those dartboard, or a gun rack or something where you can close and open it. And that's just sitting on the shelf behind me. Just adds a little bit more deadening to my room. But I have no other purpose-made acoustical treatment in this room whatsoever. The only thing that you see behind me is it. The rest is just the natural acoustics of this room.
I got a bunch of these hanging around the room.
Oral
in the
X.
corner.
Yeah, I got the corner
Oh,
ones.
those are the Leonard bass traps. Yeah.
Is that what that is? A Leonard bass trap.
Yep.
This one actually, the glue let go, which is why it's sitting handy. I just bought some more adhesive to put it back up.
That's the only thing I hate about foam. I mean, I don't like foam's getting better. I know Oralex is working hard at improving how foam is made using more soy and stuff. So there's less toxins and off gassing and smell and all that stuff. But foam can be hard to attach permanently in such a way that it doesn't fall off. And then when you attach it well enough so that it never falls off, then it ruins the wall because the paint is the glue is so nasty. So, I'm not a real big fan of the foam because of that. I like these panels that are manufactured wrapped with fabric and stuff that you can hang around your space. They look really nice. They sound acoustically, they're amazingly. 2 by 4 feet of these panels made out that are about 2 inches thick is far more effective than the same amount of area of just foam. They do a much better job of absorbing the full spectrum of the voice range.
I guess especially at the lower frequencies, they do a much better
at the lower,
job.
especially, from the mid to the top, almost anything will work. A moving blanket, drapes, carpet, whatever. But it's that critical 1,000 hertz to 100 hertz kind of range that 2-inch foam and all the other thinner products can't really deal with, and that's the most critical because that's what really the heart of your voice, the meat of your voice, is in that range, and that's the stuff that really can color the sound of your voice.
So what is meant by the device called a bass trap? I see those. I see a column, a tube or something in corners of studios. Is that used in voice studios, and what does it really do?
Yeah, well, I mean, that foam wedge you've held up, that Leonard bass trap, that is a form of a bass trap. And a bass trap it's sort of a term to describe any acoustical absorbing device or damping device that will absorb lower frequency sound. Let's say under 200 hertz or so is considered a bass trap. And they're usually designed to go in corners because bass tends to kind of follow, their bass has really long waves and they kind of propagate and build up in corners. Oh, that's why if you have a subwoofer, they sometimes say if it's not loud enough, shove it in a corner, and all of a sudden it amplifies your subwoofer tremendously. Yeah. So it's the same thing in reverse with controlling acoustics. So, but I still find them to be quite necessary in a voiceover studio. Even if there's not much content in your voice below, say, 80 hertz, there's still a lot in that critical 80 to 120 range that a bass trap will deal with really effectively. It can be made of foam. There are bass traps that are tubes, or they call them a tube trap. And depending on how they're made, oftentimes they are literally tuned to the frequency that you need to control in your room. So some of the really pro studios, they'll have an acoustician go in and bring out an RTA scope and play tones and all this stuff. And they'll say, oh, there's a node here at 83 hertz. And they'll make these tube traps. But, for a home studio, the Leonard bass traps in the corners help tremendously. Or you can use a 3 or 4 inch thick panel like these, and you can straddle the corner. So it kind of makes a triangular shape. And so the sound will pass through the panel bounce around in the corner, and on the way back out, it passes through the panel again, and it'll control much lower frequencies, usually an octave or more lower that way. So, but I find them absolutely necessary, and the smaller the room, the more important it is, because smaller rooms resonate at higher frequencies.
Oh, yeah, okay, true.
Yeah, higher, small. Think of it like blowing in a Coke bottle, right? I mean, if it has more water in it, the pitch is higher. The volume is smaller. So with rooms, it's the same thing. The bigger the room, the natural resonant frequency of the room is lower. So the frequency that might resonate in that room maybe is below your voice range. Mm-hmm. And maybe it can just be high pass filtered out with an EQ or something really, really easily. But in a small room, that natural resonant frequency can be at 110, 120, 130, 140 hertz. Mm-hmm. And that really, colors the sound. So bass traps are really important for that reason.
Interesting. Hey, you're watching This Week in Radio Tech. It's episode number 192. I'm Kirk Harnack, along with Chris Tobin in Manhattan and George Whittam. George, I didn't ask where you're coming to us from. Where are you?
Oh, I'm working right out of my house here in Santa Monica, California.
It's lovely Santa Monica. I'll bet your weather's nice.
A rainy day. First rain we've had in a couple of months. Yeah.
This is, as I said, This Week in Radio Tech. Our show is brought to you by the folks who happen to employ me, and I appreciate that very much. But they also sponsor This Week in Radio Tech. It's the Telos Alliance. And I want to tell you about, from Telos, the ubiquitous ISDN codec that, oh my goodness, they're everywhere. It's the Telos Zephyr Extreme. There you go. The Extreme is the ISDN codec that's, in use in voiceover studios and pro studios and radio stations and ball fields and stadiums all over the world. There's even a few of these at the Grand Ole Opry House and at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville. As you might expect, it connects to an ISDN line. If you don't have an ISDN line or your needs are slightly different, guess what? It connects to things like X.21 or V.35. These are standards for kind of medium speed data transmission over fixed circuits. It can also do IP audio. Now, it's not real sophisticated like other Telos products are, like the Zip 1, but if you need some IP streaming, it can stream out. It can receive a stream of IP audio in either MP3 or AAC. In fact, there's if you're a Facebook friend, you might check out, there was a story just recently about an engineer needing a quick STL from studio to transmitter, and he had a T1, but he didn't have enough cards to go into his Intraplex frame. So he brought out a stream of IP data and plugged in a Zephyr Extreme on each end of it, and voila, he had another coded, I think it was running 256 kilobits per second of AAC, plenty good enough to run into his audio processor and be on the air with another stream, just as a temporary thing until they got their studios moved. So there's all kinds of uses, voiceover, orchestras. When I don't know if they still do it, but for years, if you would ever listen to the Boston Pops live from Tanglewood, they were coming to you over a Telos Zephyr, and in later years, a Zephyr Extreme. In fact, just a couple of nights ago, my wife and I went out for dinner at the local O'Charlie's restaurant in Brentwood, Tennessee. We walk inside, and I noticed that there was a radio station vehicle outside from the Zone sports station here in Nashville. It's one of the Cumulus stations. And we go inside and realize they're doing a sports talk show. I'm not a big sports fan, but they were having a regular Titans, Tuesday night Titans talk show there. There was a couple of football players there, and one of the Titans cheerleaders was there giving away calendars. My wife wouldn't let me have one. And then they were doing the broadcast over an ISDN line with a good old Telos Zephyr, the original blackface Zephyr. I talked to the engineer there for a while, and he said, yep, do it every Tuesday night during Titans football season, and it's just great. We get great response. It sounds fantastic. It's low latency, and of course, it's just as reliable as the ISDN line is, which is still very, very good. You're going to get the bandwidth. So check it out on the web if you need an ISDN codec. And hey, we're still shipping dozens of these every month from Telos. There's worldwide demand for them still, even after they've been on the market. I guess the original Zephyr came out in, about 1993 or 4? So it's been quite a while. That ISDN codecs have been around about 20 years. Check it out on the web at telos-systems.com. And George, you were I shouldn't have yapped the whole time. Should have given you a chance to say something nice about a Telos Zephyr Extreme. Your clients use them, don't they?
Sorry, I had my mic down because I'm typing on my clackety keyboard. That's
All right, thanks.
the worst keyboard in the world for being on the air. But I just can't get over my natural keyboard. It's 15 years old and I still use it.
Really? You like that thing, huh?
Yeah, it's just it works for me the way it's splayed out. No, the Extreme. I was first introduced to the Extreme when I was doing radio broadcasts for 94 WYSP in Philadelphia. We were covering the Eagles games. And I used to come down to Dallas, and we were the enemy territory, and I'd climb up the steps into the booth down there at the old stadium, and haul a lot of equipment. And we'd always bring an Extreme with us. Actually, the original, the Express first, and then we went to the Extreme, and that was the one piece of gear I would hand carry on the plane and keep it with me in the hotel. I mean, that thing was like gold. Yeah, I carried it. I carried it everywhere. But that's when I became familiar with it. And then when I went into the voiceover industry, I was like, wow, I already know what this thing is that everybody's using. It was amazing. And I've used a lot of other codecs made by Musicam, and I've used a lot of others. And the Zephyr just seems to be the one that clicks in my brain whenever I have to use it. It requires the least amount of hurdle jumps to program it and set it up. It's more likely the one that's going to be used in the studio. If you're a voice talent and you connect to another studio using ISDN, the likelihood of them being on a Zephyr is higher than probably anything else. So if you get stuck or have problems, chances are the other engineer on the other end at least is somewhat familiar with it and can help you. So for those reasons, I still kind of I'm a proponent of using the Telos Zephyr. I wanted to ask you, Kurt. Mm-hmm. You're talking about it's had the IP streaming ability for a while, and we have the Zip now. So, do you know enough about the two to explain, like, really quickly the differences about how the two handle IP streaming and why the Zip is better suited than the Extreme for that?
Yeah, sure. And actually, this is a good opportunity for a tutorial, and this doesn't apply only to Telos gear, although we'll use that as an example, but it applies to almost any kind of IP streaming gear.
Yeah, the Road Warriors.
Yeah, Road Warriors, or even if you can compare this tech to, say, something from Barracks, which is a very inexpensive, under $1,000 kind of a codec. One of the interesting things about IP streaming, and I give a talk about this. I think I've actually presented this as one of the shows here on This Week in Radio Tech. One week when I was all by myself, I just did this presentation. Things like voice over IP telephony, pick up the phone, talk over a VoIP circuit, or things like a Barracks box, or things like the European started but international standard called NACIP for connecting codecs together over usually the internet, but it could be a private WAN. These things basically assume that the IP connection between you and the other end is perfect, that it's not going to drop any packets or lose any packets. It assumes that every packet is going to get there on time. So I kind of refer to this as dumb IP streaming. We're going to send a stream and hope they get there. And if the network's good enough, they will. They'll absolutely all get there. So Telos, for example, in the Extreme, it does dumb IP streaming. In fact, it doesn't have any automatic features at all. If you want to stream to another one, you have to open up ports in the router at the other end to allow the stream to come in and hit the decoder and let the decoder start decoding. So there's some manual setup, and if your connection is good, if it's a private connection, if it's fiber between buildings or across town or across the country, as long as the connection is good, it's going to work. And this is what even voice over IP phones are based on. They assume they're not going to lose any or many packets. By the way, you can use a codec like AAC, which has a certain amount of error concealment built into it. So even if you drop a packet or two here or there, the error concealment isn't perfect. But if it's on the order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% packet loss, you're not likely to hear it. I'm not sure I'd do a movie trailer that's going to run tens of thousands of times across the country with a dropped packet. But for a sports broadcast, perfectly fine. Now that's kind of dumb IP streaming. Again, it assumes you've got a perfect connection. The other kind of IP streaming is something that Telos and others have come up with ways to mitigate when you have a lot of drop packets, or you don't know the IP address at the other end, or you don't know that the ports have been opened up at the other end. And that's where different companies have some different schemes. Telos has a scheme that we use a rendezvous server called the Zip server, and basically a Zip 1 or another intelligent codec like that will register with a server, kind of like SIP does with a telephone. So it'll register with a server. It'll keep that line of communication open every couple times a minute. It'll say, hey, I'm still here. Here's my IP address. This is my name. And the server, makes a note of where everybody is. And then you can call to another box by calling to it, and the server says, let me open a connection to that other box for you. And then the server will attempt to do, and usually it's successful, attempt to hand that off, so that once the handoff is made, the two smart codecs are talking to each other peer-to-peer, and the server's no longer involved in the connection, just like SIP works. And then the other thing about an intelligent codec is you might have some automatic means to adjust the amount of buffering going on. So if you're dropping packets or they're arriving out of order or late, we might increase the buffering in order to get a higher number of them coming in a timely enough fashion. Or if it's really bad, we might tell the other end, hey, slow down your bit rate, dude. This connection is not handling what you're sending. So the codecs can adjust automatically, and different companies have different amounts of that kind of automatic stuff, but that's the whole idea there.
Yeah, I was asked to explain it to somebody recently, and I didn't have the best answer for them. I just kind of said that the Extreme expects there to be a really solid internet connection with absolutely no issues, whereas the others can deal with a public internet connection. So I guess that kind of is right.
Yeah. It's one day I was playing with the Zip 1 that's right here in the rack behind me, and I placed a call. Normally, of course, we use coded audio, right? AAC. There's AAC ELD at 64 kilobits, pretty low bit rate. Sounds pretty good, but I'm not sure I'd do a symphony concert with it. There's HEAAC, there's regular AAC. We have aptX now as an option, but the bit rate on that is pretty high. And one day I called up to our tech support with my Zip 1, and I'm listening to the music. I'm just boogieing along. They're playing some oldies, and I realized, I kind of know what coded audio sounds like, at least at sub 256 bit rates. What's he sending me? It sounds really good. And I went and looked. He was sending me linear audio at 2.3 megabits per second over the public internet. And you know what?
Wow.
We watch Netflix on 2 or 3 TVs at the same time here at our house. And Cleveland, they've got a nice internet connection. It just worked. It just worked.
I know. And all we need is a good pipe, right? I got Fios at my house, fiber. Man, it's just awesome. Just awesome.
So I wanted to move to another connection about personalities, or at least about how the business works a bit. This guy whose voice you now hear everywhere is Mike Rowe.
Yeah.
The Dirty Jobs guy.
Yep. He's doing real well.
You hear his voice everywhere. I mean, on all kinds of commercials, and of course you see him on some, but he narrates so many things. It's just amazing. I don't know if you've dealt with Mike or not. Do you have any idea what his studio setup is, or if he goes into pro studios to record everything?
I think the majority of those actors that are really busy screen actors, celebrity status, the majority of them probably don't have a home studio at all. Almost everything they do is done at a commercial studio. And it's mainly because they aren't working in the world of promo and trailer and that kind of thing where it's so highly on demand. So those guys, their sessions can be booked in a day in advance or a week in advance, and the schedules aren't nearly as crazy. And the sessions are usually longer. When you're doing major national ad campaigns, there's the customer or the client, so the product, whoever the client is, a few of them are there at the studio. It's a much bigger budget, and it's all about impressing the clients and all this stuff. And it's a different world. So most of those guys, I believe, are working in studio. So the studios I've put together for a couple of screen actors, Patrick Warburton is one of them. All he needs to do from home is to get a good sounding audition. So he doesn't have to drive into his agent, That's what a lot of them, that's all they really do at home. Everything else they're going to be doing in commercial studios for the most part.
Oh, Patrick Warburton. I know who this guy is now. He's sometimes he plays the guy you love to hate.
Oh yeah, he's
Yeah.
played the Tick. He played the Tick in the Tick cartoon series.
That was his voice?
He was not only did he play the Tick voice, but he was the Tick in person when they had a live action version of the show.
Okay.
And he was also like Elaine's boyfriend on Seinfeld for a few. I don't know. The guy's, he's one of those faces. You see him and you recognize him.
Yeah,
that's a lot of the industry of those kind of workaday voice and workaday actors who never really get that household name, but they work. They work and work. You go to IMDb and their credits just go and go and go, because they're just always working. But I'll tell you,
I just started scrolling down IMDb. Sure enough, oh my gosh, he was on one of those Apple commercials that had the Mac and PC guy.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, though, the legit voiceover actors that don't, are not A-list, B-list actors, they despise this influx of screen actors and celebrities, coming into the voiceover world. It's like, aren't they making enough money already? Why are you coming in here and taking our jobs? I mean, some of them get really upset about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like they all came in about 15 years ago and started doing animation, for Pixar and all that, when they started booking celebrity actors on all the voiceover work. So
Tom Hanks, all kinds of voiceover work.
The world has changed, and when I saw James Earl Jones is one thing, but when I saw Jackson, wow, what's his name on the credit card commercials? No, what? Samuel L. Jackson. Doing commercials for a credit card company. That's when I knew that it's all over. It's all over now. We got major actors doing shilling products on national TV. It's over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Chris Tobin, I'm sorry. The last half hour's been yakety yak with Kirk Harnack.
Yeah. Sorry,
what's going on? What's going on in your mind, Chris Tobin?
No, I was just thinking. George is right. I saw that Samuel L. Jackson commercial a couple of weeks ago, and I sort of sat back and go, "Wow, how times have changed." Because I have friends who are voice actors, and we always get together and talk, and it's interesting, the stories. And George, a lot of the stories you're conveying, I've heard from that same side of the fence, and it's interesting. Some of them, I worked with a couple of guys at a recording studio. He was the voice for the Discovery Channel, Bill, I can't think of his last name, but he was a hoot. And boy, the stuff he would talk
Ratner?
about. Is it Bill Ratner? Is his last name Ratner? Maybe it was.
Just curious.
I just knew him by name Bill. That was it.
Okay.
That's all. You come into the studio, I'd set him up, make sure everything's in order. We'd chat and just laugh. And some of the things he would talk about and the reasons why things are done the way they are, I sit there going, wow, if you have that skill set, that's what makes the difference. And just like you pointed out, he was talking about how he says the industry is going to go in a direction where they're going to want people with plain voice. They don't want it to be too recognizable anymore. I see that coming. And when you're talking to a voice actor who's got a certain distinctive sound to their voice, and he's saying he has to be less distinctive, you're like, boy, you're going to have a tough time with that one. But you're right. Some of these guys have managed to do it very well. And I remember when I worked at radio stations years and years ago locally. Jim Kerr, who was a morning show host here in New York City for many years, he still is. He's also been the voice of many commercials, many products. And a friend of mine, we had a mutual friend, we would go to dinner and talk, and he would just simply say, you know what, if I could do 2 or 3 commercials a year, I'm happy. That's it. That's all I need. Because I can't take the pressure. This was back in 1987, 88. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, 2 or 3 commercials a year, that's enough for you to be happy, and there's so much pressure. Fast forward to today, I'm working with half a dozen different people in the voice world. I'm going, holy mackerel, these guys are juggling like crazy. And then you have the actors coming into the same field, and you're going, wow, talk about competition. But it's a fascinating business. You get to do it every day. And it's just some of the folks I've worked with and just had the chance to sit and listen to. It's genius, some of the things they can do. But you're right.
You want to see something cool? My own show is called East West Audio Body Shop, and it's this little corner of the web
podcast.
Yeah, where we just talk about voiceover, and it's a lot of tech, but we also have these awesome guests on. We had Maurice LaMarche who was the brain in Peking the Brain, and just these awesome actors. But we had on our buddy Joe Cipriano on a show 2 Mondays ago, or was it last? No, it was last Monday. And Joe was like, "Well, actually, right now I have to do a spot. Do you want to come with me into the booth?" And he had his laptop, and he carried it, from outside the booth into the booth, sat it down, and we all sat there, our whole audience, all 60 people, whatever, and we all sat there watching it live while he did a promo gig for the Queen Latifah show or something that he had just started doing. And so if anybody wants to see a voice actor doing a promo in real time and hear both sides of the conversation and see how they, just how it all works, it is gold. I mean, that is so rare to get to see that. And I take it for granted because I have been in so many booths at home, home studios watching these guys do this. But our audience, I was like, it was getting kind of long. We'd been watching them for about 20 minutes. And I was like, yeah, let's break away. And the chat room was like, no, don't. This is amazing. So it's a cool place to go see something being done in real time. And Joe, just being the really smart, savvy guy he was, he would pod up the sound of the station or the studio's playback up on the speakers whenever he had a second to do it, so we could hear what was coming back, whereas normally you wouldn't hear anything. So it's really cool. Yeah. If you want to check it out, it's on YouTube, and our show's short. The abbreviation of the show is EWABS, ewabs.com, and that show with Joe is gold. It's really cool. You have to check it out.
We'll look for that. In fact, if folks want to, okay, you said ewabs.com, EWABS.com is where they can find out more about your podcast, right? Yeah. It's a show very similar to this. In fact, our buddies at Twit, Leo Laporte, that was our kind of my inspiration for how we do the show. So if you guys like this show, our show will be very familiar to you. You'll probably enjoy it.
It's a great show. I've watched it. I've watched the show.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
It's great.
All right. Guys, we're going to have to bring it to a close here. George Whittam.
Jeez, really?
Yeah, it's an hour. It's gone by already.
Holy cow.
Yes, I know. George Whittam can be found at georgewhittam.com, as it says in his lower third, if we'll take his shot again and see that right there. Take note of it, georgewhittam.com. And the other website for George, or another one of many, is ewabs.com. You can find his podcast on YouTube, and I'm sure at ewabs.com as well.
And my whole world of voiceover technology is at vostudiotech.com. So don't get lost.
Okay. All right. I hope there's links all from georgewhittam.com.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's why I send everybody there first.
Good deal. Good deal. Hey, Chris Tobin, thank you for joining us from New York City, Manhattan. Appreciate you being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. I had a great time. It's good stuff to share, and look forward to more of them.
All right. Good. And folks, we're going to take next week off as we break for Thanksgiving on This Week in Radio Tech. We'll be back right after that, though. Some of our upcoming guests, we have Greg Oganowski. He's been on before to talk more about audio coding and what the world of streaming and cell phones and audio processing is all about. Also, Scott Feibush is going to be with us talking about his tower calendar for next year and the happenings in the Northeast Radio Watch, what's going on in the Northeast with radio broadcasting. It's always a pleasure to have Scott Feibush on. And more guests, too. We got them scheduled and upcoming on This Week in Radio Tech. Thanks to Telos Systems and the Telos Zephyr Extreme for sponsoring this week's show. Thanks to Andrew Zarian back in Queens, New York at the GFQ Network. Guys from Queens, appreciate him very much. And all the other podcasts on GFQ. Check him out at gfqnetwork.com. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.
That's all the bandwidth we can pill for this week. Another tort has propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This Week in Radio Tech. Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you like today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here. Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penelope Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission. Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango. Signing off. Okay.